Evening, everyone. Welcome to all the audiences. I believe some people have already been listening to us, the chatter that we've been having. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I'm Sudhir Kukreja, co-founder of Credence EduTech and Credence International Schools, playing the role of a host as well as a moderator today because our host Anushka is a little unwell. And at the same time, Mr. Vikrit Desai, who's the managing director of Satluj Group of Schools, he's also running a little late and should be joining us in another 5 minutes. Without wasting much time, I'd like to introduce everyone on our August panel today evening. So I'll start with Ms. Fatima Agarkar, who is the founder of Agarkar Center of Excellence, an eminent educationist, I believe, keeps sharing her knowledge, her ideas, her thought process on the education system, depending on her illustrious career, I would say, which spans a couple of decades now. Though she doesn't look as old, but yeah, she's quite senior and respectable member of the education fraternity. Welcome, Fatima, on the panel. We'll look forward to have your words and your thoughts on the subject today.
Real pleasure, Sudhir. I think the fact that we're actually talking about middle years is very, very important. And for me personally, the toughest piece in the education pie. So really looking forward to listening to all the other panelists. And thank you so much for having me over.
Thank you, Fatima. Welcome. Our second panelist on the show today is Mrs. Beena Nair, who happens to be the academic head of Jaipuria Group of Schools. Once again, I think Beena ma'am doesn't really need a great introduction. The fact that she's heading the academics at Jaipuria Group of Schools, which in itself is an institution par excellence and somebody who's already established multiple schools across India and are establishing a very high standards of education in the modern decade since 2 decades or so now. Thank you so much, Beena ma'am, for joining us. Welcome on the show.
Thank you so much, Sudhir, for inviting me. I'm excited to have a very, fruitful discussion with eminent panelists and have some takeaways here from the panel. I'm excited to this discussion. Thank you for inviting me here.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Our third panelist today is Dr. Shunila Chauhan. Dr. Shunila is the principal of Thakur International School. Once again, one of the most prestigious schools in Mumbai, if I'm not wrong. And another thing which I'll probably wanted to highlight, but Vikrit has not joined us. So on the panel today, we've got people from across the country. I believe Beena ma'am is joining us from Kerala. Fatima and Shunila are present in Mumbai. And Mr. Vikrit is going to join us apparently from Delhi or Chandigarh. So across the length and breadth of the country, I think we are representing and should be a fruitful discussion on what is NEP. Shunila ma'am, your opening remarks, and I think I'll start on, I'm sorry, I have to introduce Rajiv also before this. So anything, just a welcome note for you.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for having me here, Scuzo, as well as everyone on board. And I'm really looking forward to interacting with all of you and learning something new. And I hope whatever I have to say adds value to the middle school years, which we're going to talk about.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'll also take the opportunity to introduce Mr. Rajiv Kothari, who happens to be the co-founder of Scuzo EduCommerce. Rajiv, most welcome to the show. Anything that you'd like? I think you can start off with a quick brief on what Scuzo is all about before we go on to take our academic subject.
Thanks, Sudhir. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. To start with, what I was talking to actually Fatima and the panelists out here, the shift in the service also. So technology is one aspect to the entire thing from a school perspective, but there is also something known as a service, which I'll be talking about here. So yes, there is a traditional pattern which is going on, however, the parents, the age group of parents, the wanting of the parents is changing dramatically. Yeah, that is what we've been given to understand. So Scuzo, what has done is practically, is an EduCommerce platform where all the school essentials, whether you talk about books, you talk about uniform, shoes, toys, anything, school essentials in total, stationaries and everything, whatever a parent wants to buy, practically can do that, on the online part of it, and they be delivered at the doorstep. So just to give you some statistics, of course, a lot of schools showed interest. However, there were certain limitations thanks to the pandemic which took place. However, there is a huge shift where parents were like so happy to do something like that, because what I got a feedback, there is one school in Kandivali, I'm so sure Shunila ma'am would know that, that is Gundecha as a school, which was there with one of our partners. And fortunately, the parents, the feedback, because majority of the parents are working parents. Yeah. Uh, and of course, whenever you're supposed to buy books or you're supposed to buy uniforms, I don't know, you buy all the possible school essentials. It is supposed to be a weekday, okay, in the middle of the day, where parents are supposed to be like wasting what, approximately 2 hours. And when you're talking about working parents, and if you take count that 2 hours, uh, it's a good value. It's a good money. Yeah.
You're
And
apparently not counting the travel time.
there are too many things, but I'm talking about the absolute time, because they have to take an off from the office, or they have to do something or the other, make some arrangements, and ensure that they have to go and buy it. Yeah. And that is where this pandemic kind of pushed a lot of schools to approach or take that facility, give that service to the parents. And very fortunately, there have been like 10 schools who have agreed to give this service for the next 3 years with us. Yeah. And as of now, we have close to 125 schools which are associated with us. Yeah. This year we could do only the books aspect of it, because of course, I'm so sure everyone is aware that the uniforms and the shoes and everything were not really purchased by the parents, because schools were not operational per se physically. So, books were apparently the most important thing to execute the curriculum, which most of the schools were doing it. So that is where we do that. Now, how do we benefit the parents out of the entire services? That whatever they buy worth, it could be 3,000, 5,000, or 10,000, we give them the equal amount of Scuso points, which gets redeemed, against all the offers which we give. Now, when I'm talking about offers, I'm talking about Make My Trip, Oyo, 1MG, Farm Easy, all these big brands. Yeah. So practically the books are more or less free. Yeah. And that's where, the entire service comes into the play. Now Sudhir has been a great, I would say, a leader in the education space, and also in the technology front. He forefronts the entire aspect of technology, and this is the only school as of today where we could integrate Scuso on the ERP. Yeah. So what he wants now is he has huge demands. Yeah. So from the technology front, so he wants a tuck shop, a virtual tuck shop on the ERP, where a parent, because a lot of kids, I'm so sure, I don't know if principals agree to me on that. Me being a parent, I'm just putting my point of view, that child will tell me in the night, or maybe a day before, or maybe an hour before, that okay, this is what the school has asked me to give. Now parents go bizarre, that where do I go and buy it right away? Yeah. So that's where he wants to build that, because that is what we see that practically as a challenge. And what he wants us to do is that, there would be a physical tuck shop, but because I don't want to have the money transaction happening by a child or anything of that sort, a parent can just purchase it there, and I could, give it in the classroom. So that is what he wants us to build, and that is what we're working on. So that's about Scuso. So we customize anything and everything what a school demands, and we work around things. So that's about Scuso. If any questions, feel free to ask later on. Up to you, Sudhir.
Thank you so much, Rajiv, for a quick orientation. And I'm sure a lot of schools would be joining Scuso going forward. Really enjoyed being associated. Thanks a lot for this opportunity. Well, moving on to the panel, I think I'll now open the floor to the subject matter of the discussion in the evening today. So in the last 2 weeks, we've kind of tried to break down the entire NEP policy and how it's going to impact the life of a child, a parent, and at the same time, the teachers of the school management. So how this one policy change, which has come after almost 3 decades, is going to impact the implementation, the ideas, the philosophy, and the thought process across the education system. We thought the concept behind breaking this entire thing into 4 segments was to deal with it in a lot more details and try and analyze as to how a particular segment of the education life cycle of a child is getting impacted because of this one change that is being brought about. Our session today is focused on the middle school education, and the way we've structured the entire thing is we're going to talk about 4 aspects of major changes that are kind of suggested in the policy. One, of course, is to talk about the practical aspect of learning that needs to be brought into the education system. So far, I think we've gone ahead and completely embraced what was the rote learning process of teaching learning across our schools across the country. But now is probably the time, first time I believe our national policy has recognized the fact that we need to go beyond what is textbook. We need to go a step further and kind of acknowledge that, okay, it has to be more relevant. It has to be more significant in terms of a student's life and career ahead, for which he's actually, taking the education in the school system. So that's one part of it that we are going to touch upon. Second aspect of the entire discussion that very interestingly comes out of this NEP policy, and specifically with middle schools, is bringing about the concept of internships, and as well as bringing in a large number of industry experts into the classroom. Now, I understand, and as many schools that I've interacted with over the course of last 2 decades of my career, I have seen some schools across India who have very, very proactively done this. They've got those industry experts to come in into the school system, talk to the students, give them a taste of what is a real life scenario, how what they're learning inside the classroom is going to be relevant when they step out in the real world. And that is what is apparently now systematically being brought into the system. And I'm sure that will have very far reaching implications and impact on the, or a positive impact on the overall education system. The third most important aspect, which I believe is the edtech industry is talking about left, right, and center, is the coding introduction at the school level. Now, a large number of people are clueless about what this coding is about, all about. Are we talking about things like Whitehead Junior to come into this system? Or are we talking about some basic, logical thinking and those kind of aspects to be brought in? Or are we talking about really a Java based or C++ kind of a coding to come into the school system? Is that appropriate? Is that not appropriate? I think too many questions to answer and really ponder upon. Lastly, of course, we're going to talk about the holistic development, integration of sports, and looking at the life expectancies of a child. How does that child really grow up into a great matured individual with a personality traits which are kind of trusted upon a school, that all right, this is what the school is going to nurture into a child into, and turn him into a great human being more than a just a learned student. So I believe I'm going to go to each one of our panelists, and who in their own capacity are experts to comment on this. To start with, I'll go with Shunila ma'am and ask her to share her opinion on this policy, and specifically if you can, ma'am, throw some light on how do you see the entire aspect of experiential learning making a difference to the entire learning process, what we've been doing so far, and how do you think it's likely to change? What should be the steps to bring about this kind of a change in the system?
Thank you so much, Sudhir. And going on to the changes that have come about, of course, it's been a welcome change, and we've all been waiting for it. Now, I actually had a international school which follows the Cambridge board, which already had experiential learning. But the moment all of us educators that we saw it, we were so happy that now every child will soon be able to experience this. You do not have to be only in an international school. Right from that terrible divide that was there between, as we were just talking before this started, also before we started our conversation about the theory class and the practical class. And very often the practical class used to get, sort of sidelined, and used to only go on with theory. That was what was there in the present system. But now with this coming into the changes that have come in with the NEP 2020, we are going to see a lot more of a proper, hands-on learning experience for students in the field of science, in art, in humanities, in social science. So it's not just going to be something that's going to be there only in our textbooks. So typically where we are, when we used to have this once in a term field trip where children used to be taken, maybe, maybe not, and one maybe in term two, that's completely going to be, it's going to change, where we are going to have children experience what they're learning. So if you're learning about drip irrigation, for example, go out and see it, go and experience it. So typically in our school also, we have made this drip irrigation on the wall with the leftover bottles and all that. And with that, we have the plants which are there, and then the water sort of drips into it, and children learn it so beautifully. So that's how we're going to look at it. And even theater can be integrated too, because that too is a part of your, you learn all your leadership skills, your speaking skills. All these get honed when we actually say write a play, perform a play, and do various things that bring about that collaborative role. All our 21st century skills are also integrated into that. And even in the form, even art used to be a subject where we used to just have this thing where the kids who were very, talented and could draw, they drew very well. Otherwise, it was just how do we fill up the art book. So there are changes now completely, because experiential learning is actually, uh, it helps learners who are basically more kinesthetic learners, because every learner is not auditory and visual only. So we have kinesthetic learners too, where they need to experience it, feel it, do those things. And be it in any field, whether it's social science, it could be in history or geography, or actually performing each and every experiment, not just having beautiful journals where you write it and know the outcome. You should actually be able to see it. So the NEP has actually suggested that we should integrate it. Of course, there are going to be a few challenges, because some of the teachers who come from a more traditional background will find it difficult, because there's a lot of back end work that needs to go into such a class. You have to prepare for an experiential learning class, and that's not only with your lesson plan, all the learners are addressed equally. And then even the assessment, some of the teachers, so they are a little worried about it, that if you're going to keep on doing only experiential learning, what about assessments? How are we going to assess the kids, but the children? So that's not at all a problem. There we need to actually find out different ways, and each teacher has to look at the learning objectives, that the learning objectives are met, and frame her own way of assessing. And that much, actually, as we were talking about different schools giving that kind of freedom, we need to give that freedom. I'm sure that many of us who are here as heads of different schools know how important it is to let your teacher be have that freedom to actually experiment. So experiential learning should not just be left as just a sentence, and okay, come on, you should integrate it. Because we're talking about internships. We're talking about if there's a news paper or a newsletter in school, let the children be a part of it, take recordings, interview people, publish that newspaper. If you have a tuck shop, or as you said, a school essential shop where you buy things, let the children also manage it. Because that is when we are going to integrate it and have a holistic kind of an experience with all the subjects, because everything comes into that. Your business skills, your economics, your English is improved, your each and everything is addressed, your math. So just it should not be just left as a word, but there are many ways of integrating it apart from going for field trips and museum trips and visits to the lab. So that is what we are looking at.
I'm sorry, I was on a mute. So I'm sure there are a million ways to bring about the experiential learning into the system, and schools like Thakur International are definitely doing a great job in doing that. What I'll probably want to bring another element into this entire aspect of experiential learning and the so-called internship part of it. With this, I think I'll go to Fatima and also Meena ma'am, who is heading a group of schools with CBSE pattern, and Fatima under Agarkar Center of Excellence, I'm sure, is already consulting a large number of schools across India, different geographies, different boards, different set of people. Fatima, with your experience, how do you see this entire concept of internships and the experiential learning impacting different strata of the learners, whether these are international schools or CBSE schools, or for that matters a state board school in a remote part of the country?
Thanks, Sudhir. I think one of the things the National Education Policy has talked about is skilling of teachers. I think that's a huge component, because pan India, we're not one academic board. We'll never be. So when we work with different board requirements, it's all assessment based. I mean, this is a great policy, but eventually it's all going to be about how children are going to be assessed. So all this experiential learning can only fit in if that final assessment allows for that creativity, higher order thinking to bring in that experiential learning. Because while you take them for field trips, you do project based learning, problem solving, all of that, if eventually the assessment remains what I call brick and mortar, direct questions, teachers are not going to be motivated to take them through that journey of inquiry. Then it's always going to be about handing over facts. Now you optimize on the facts. And that really is the reality when we're looking at some of the schools. I'm going to say some state schools are already doing it beautifully. It actually depends on Mr. Hahn said, it's about how the management puts it down and allows the teachers to. But Sudhir, I do believe teachers need direction. They need, experiential learning is not about just touching and feeling. It's actually the entire project management cycle. It's about, it brings in design thinking as well. Now, these are terms, these are skills that the teachers first need to be equipped with to be able to handle a project with the child and actually bring out the best part about the field trip. There is a huge divide. It's not about international schools doing a good job. There are certain state schools. As a nation, we've made those inroads. I think Rajiv mentioned we needed a jolt. We've got there. We've started it. We have a fair amount of work to be done because to the experiential learning in a small town is very different from how it's handled at the metro. And that big divide for me happens because of the way that teachers are exposed and thereafter skilled to be able to do it. I think the big thing will be R&D. Sudhir, I don't think as an industry, we as management, we actually have a cell in each of our schools to focus on, because experiential learning will work beautifully if your schools already have a research and development. Now, small budget schools may find this difficult. The larger ones are already thinking and doing it. Those schools that are doing well with experiential learning are those schools that have enough repository, whatever you call it, to be able to pull out data and help children and bring in resources like guest lecturers, internships. I've handled internships in our school, but to get the corporates to come in at that time, in between your exams and in between sports day and annual concert is actually a logistic nightmare. So while it sounds brilliant on paper, you know what? It's pushed to summer. Let the parents do it. This is now an opportunity for schools to say, you know what? It's going to be week without walls. For this 5 days, no English, no math, no history, no PE. Can you imagine the principals are already worried about the teachers screaming? Get the kids into corporate world or get the corporates in and let them learn through that. Honestly, in those 5 days or 7 days, they learn more. They'll even come on Saturday and Sunday. Provided principals get out of this mindset of 50 periods, every English teacher wants 9 periods, math teacher wants 8 periods. Imagine if you take these periods away from them. How will they finish the syllabus? That's a mindset change. Great on paper. How it's going to be implemented is not about international or national. Again, I keep saying some of the most progressive minds have been these state schools. It's about now everyone following something so that, like Mr. Hahn said, every child progresses. I see certain implementation challenges. For me, R&D is going to be important. For me, the management's vision is going to be important. Internship is not some experience letter that a child gets because he went to a law office and all he saw was what people did on Zoom calls. It's actually about writing an argument or assisting a paralegal. So I think we have to deep dive into it. I'd love to see an SOP for schools to develop before they even attempt internship, because then you're actually wasting time and then you might as well give it to the English people.
That's true. In fact, I was just about to ask you guys that, anybody can take up this question. In principle, we know what experiential learning is. In principle, we know what internships are. Given the virtue of the fact that our, at a higher education level, we've been doing it for a while. But how do you systematically bring in this entire approach of experiential learning, like you said, there will be a R&D required, there will be a lot of logistical preparation required, and more important than anything else, a complete mindset change at the level of a teacher or the principal at the school management level is something which is going to be the need of the hour, and something that the schools will have to build in terms of their capacity to do it, in terms of their logistics to do it, in terms of their entire preparation, or the entire annual planning has to be done in that format, that this is what is the approach that we are going to take. So how many of our schools are ready to do this? I think I'd like to bring in Beena ma'am on this. Ma'am, in contrast with what Shunila and Fatima added right here, I'd like, and I believe you're heading a chain of schools which is predominantly into CBSE schools, unlike an international school. So while international schools have had this opportunity and the approach, mindset, resources, everything to probably do justice to this aspect of it, where do you think CBSE schools are standing into this kind of a preparation mode?
Yeah, thank you so much, Sudhir. I was just waiting to answer this question because I had a group of schools, Seth MR Jaipuria group of schools, which are mainly in tier 2, tier 3 cities. So, but the quality education that we provide there and the mindset of the teachers are like, as you correctly said, Fatima, that we have to skill the teachers. So we have an upskilling program for the teachers, and NEP just came. Even before NEP came in, we are running a program called IDEAL, that is interdisciplinary enrichment activity learning, which is twice a year, very, very structured. So in that, the students are doing a project. There is no maths class, no science class. So every once in every 3 months, there's a project which is structured. We at corporate level design it and give it to the students, train the teachers to get it done. Students don't even know that whether they are doing English, maths, physics, computer science, or history, but they just focus on a problem and then find out ways and means. And in that problem solution journey, they go through different subjects. So this has been happening in our group of schools. So this is how we give them real experience. And then in that, this is how we do, I think. So I would like to say that even CBSE has appreciated our curriculum. We are, Seth MR Jaipuria group of school is one among the 5 schools who got appreciation from CBSE. Our curriculum has been really appreciated. So this is one thing that we've been doing. So, and then another thing is, like, it's not about whether it is a city or a town or a small place or a big place. We will have to bring the entire system, to that mindset of growth mindset and progressive mindset. So I think our group of children and students and even the management is very progressive, and we are giving a lot of experiential learning to the students. And I'm very happy that NEP talks about it a lot. So now we will have to think about, right now we are implementing it, and it is just not a field trip. It is just not a kind of a one time somebody coming and giving lecturing, but children. And then after this, one more thing that we do in our group of schools, I think everybody can follow. After doing this experiential learning, they come and have a program called Jaipuria Scholastic Expression. Children are free to express what they learned in every 3 months, calling the parents and the other seniors to involve. So what is a learning? So completely done by children, academic expression on how their experience is in this projects and what we take up. And believe in me, even in small places, children are children, but we have to tell them what is in this, and they do it very seriously, and we've got a very good response. So experiential learning has given a lot of good thinking in our children, and have given critical thinking, analytical thinking skill. And believe in me, our children were much prepared to face this pandemic. When this pandemic started, within no time we went on to online classes, wherein the devices were a problem. Children didn't have any device. In the small mobile, using WhatsApp learnings happened. And our study has been taken by CBSE also, like how 25,000 students, and I think 80% students attended the classes right from March onwards. So that kind of skilling is required for the teacher, mindset for the students. And I think that that is how we have to prepare the students through experiential learning, through project-based learning, that anything which is, anything unexpected to be prepared well and to do well. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your thoughts, ma'am. I'm really sure Jaipuria Group is doing a great job into this. But the educationist that I am, I believe in going in a little more details. And now that we're having a policy discussion, I'd like to once again throw this question at all three of you. And we'll probably have to wrap it up in 3 minutes. So a quick remark on this, and then I'll move on to our next two agenda that we have in the discussion. Is how do you bring about this change systematically? Like, I went to an MBA college which had 2 months of internship. So those 2 months were dedicated for internships. So I'm really I know we need to do this, but my question is how? What changes do you think we need to bring in on a policy level or a systematic level? Shunila was talking about the examination. She was talking about the assessment. If you ask me as a school leader, I believe when I do something experiential, the assessment is done then and there, because either the child is able to do it or he's not able to do it, period. That's the point. Or is able to do it to a certain extent. But when I have to do it, and I'm sure, Veena ma'am, you've done a great job at Jaipuria. But my point here is, how do we do it on a systematic level across the country? Because the policy is for the country, not a handful of schools that we represent, at our level or a particular city. How does it really impact the entire country? What systematic change do you think would be the need of the hour? Anyone over here?
I think training of teachers is what the focus should be. Yes, that's it from my side.
One mark, sure.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in and say that there can be some exemplars. The fact that each of these academic boards have put in now into the NEP their evidence of success or performance or best practices. If there could be an exemplar, like a minimum and a maximum given to each school, like assuming I'm a small state school in a small town, I still do not know how to structure it. So give me, what we call exemplars, right? When we hand over, if I'm doing a narrative, my teacher will give me what she expects out of that narrative. What is the rubric? What is she expecting? She's expecting introduction. She's expecting character, pronunciations, etc. So I'm talking about an exemplar that can be handed over like a blueprint across boards. Then your flexibility as an international school with your resources will go to a different level. But I think some sort of blueprint that says minimum days, maximum days, non-negotiable, negotiable, so that we're all ensuring that all our kids are progressing at the same time, not just those who have the resources. And secondly, I do insist on the R&D. I think critically as an industry, this should be built in. And again, with that comes the SOPs with that. What is it that this department will do? How will it contribute? Skilling, she's already answered. So for me, it's about the exemplars and about R&D, which can be across the board. It's not school specific.
I just want to add to that actually. Sorry, Sudhir, are you on mute? Yeah, I just want to add to that since we are talking about upskilling the teachers and that we should take in we should have a kind of a blueprint. A lot of hand-holding needs to be done. And this is when we all have to collaborate and throw in our best and help those, because we are all at different levels. So if we really need to come up and bring the others also to a particular, at least to some kind of an average, then a lot of hand-holding, not just, pieces of paper, but actually going there and being there for them and helping them. Because there are people who just, they are really at a very different end altogether. I've experienced that, so that needs to be done. A lot of hand-holding of teachers and everyone.
So Sudhir, just like the national education policy is not for just the state schools or national schools, international schools were already doing it. This policy is bringing the whole nation together. Like that, if the appendix could actually have, quick exemplars of how to do it, a minimum, maximum, it's non-negotiable. I think that would work. And that should be the next step with the states now coming up with their own SOPs for how they want to interpret the national education policy dependent on their state resources.
That's like yet another Pandora's box the moment we talk about the state and the central subject of education.
Sudhir, can I just add in, though I'm not a deep rooted, as I said. So,
Sure.
but still, I'm just talking from a parent's point of view. So I understand all the educationists with all due respect. You know, uh, just because I happen to be a parent and have a lot of parents around, surrounded around. So what happens is in the entire thing is that I feel what Fatima and Beena ma'am said, that, it is practically very important to train a teacher for that execution part of it. I personally feel that, it is also a parent counseling, which is very important. Yeah, because when I see a lot of parents around, they still get fascinated with those numbers and their grades and all of that. Yeah. And if you ask me personally, as a founder of Schoolzo, yeah, I understand with all the grades. I've never been a great grader or number game around the school part of it. But yeah, I personally feel that counseling of parents is equally important, because they still understand that syllabus khatam nahi hua, ye khatam nahi hua, numbers are poor. So that counseling is very important to enlighten them on that.
I'm sure parents are an equal stakeholder in any policy, in any structure that we talk
Right.
about. Well, with this, I'm going to open another Pandora's box. In my last, webinar, when we were discussing about primary education, we talked about language, the native language teaching, which opened up and was really crazy a discussion. I believe an equal stature is something which is in the middle school level that we're talking about, is the word called coding. Now, this is a buzzword which has probably shaken the entire education world across the schools in India. I think I'll open this word coding with all three panelists over here. For a first quick remark, when the policy says that a class 6 level child needs to get into coding, what does it mean to you? What do you plan to do? How do you plan to approach this?
Sudhir, it's very simple. Coding is just about a set of instructions. It's about critical thinking. It's about a child analyzing the next moves, scenario building. For me, coding is not white hat junior. I beg your pardon. No offense, anyone. It is about gearing a child's ability and mind to think through a problem, to actually understand what the end goal is, work backward, a set of commands. It's almost like any subject. I have to do it in English, I have to do it in math, I will have to do it in sciences, I will have to do it in ICT. It is across the board. So coding eventually, when you're, when you do become a coder, it enables you, yes, to create and all of that. But where is that first initiation happening? So I think the national education policy use the word coding to talk about critical thinking. It is not to create the next entrepreneur at age 8.
That's true. So I think this is exactly what I and Veena ma'am were discussing yesterday in our pre-session, and she talked about it. I'm sure she has more to add to this.
Yeah. Sudhir, thank you so much. That's a buzzword you correctly said. So when I talk about the new curriculum, it aims to inculcate 21st century skills, mathematical thinking, and scientific temper. So the policy proposes commencing coding lessons for students from class 6 onwards. As per NEP 2020, it should be considered as a basic skill to be developed from a very young age. So I have certain questions which is pondering me. As Fatima said it in simple terms, coding is it's a language that the computers use to understand and process human commands. But in the last few months, many parents in India have enrolled their children in coding classes because NEP talked about it. So before I go to coding, I just want to tell you that NEP was created pre-COVID and was released during COVID when technology was to the fullest. So like before, so I think had the NEP, given after COVID, a lot more of technology would have been in the policy itself. Right now, in the integration of technology part in the policy is restricted only to coding, because they thought that, but right now, like before the discussion, Fatima was saying that we should consider the whole school as a big computer lab. So I think that now the parents are, more, they know that the buzzword is coding. So they are finding that they are trying to find out how they can teach the children coding, and some of them to keep the children up to date with the competition. That is why they are enrolling. Some of them to make the children learn something new. That's it. But I think that nothing has changed suddenly. In older children were already doing coding, but that coding, that buzzword was not created. But I think the parents are learning the importance of teaching code to the children at a very early age. Like Fatima correctly said, it is about like giving that knowledge of the children to develop that analytical thinking. Coding is only that. And I feel that technology and artificial intelligence is the future, and children should be abreast with these subjects. Through coding, we should be teaching our children a language relevant to this century, which can build them technology-based solution to problems, and problems that they see around the real world. So they will be able to bring, come out with solution based on technology, how to solve the problem. So basically, through coding, we are developing that analytical mindset in children. So any new problem comes, the children should be able to solve it using technology. When COVID came, till that time, we never thought that, the classes can happen online. But now that is happening. So I think middle school is the right school, right age to start giving them coding techniques. However, there are few questions that I ponder. I would like to throw it to the panel. Whether it is a basic skill, how important is the knowledge of it? At what age should the children be taking the coding classes? Because I've seen children taking fright from, class kindergarten, the coding is starting. Parents are telling the children, you should start coding. Whether it's actually coding, do the children need to know how to code? Or whether it's only algorithms, learning algorithms. These are the questions that I'm yet to see what kind of implementation will happen at the school level. So we will have to work towards it so that the children are able to do, analyze the problem, analyze the situation, and find a solution for that. That's all.
So I think, ma'am, basis the interaction that I've had across schools, principals, school leaders, teachers, and parents, of course, and like we were discussing yesterday, coding is to be approached at 3 different levels across the schools, right? Something that we would probably want to, like Fatima mentioned, one is approaching a problem systematically, trying to decode what is the logic, what are the steps behind approaching the problem statement, then finding a solution, creating multiple options, choosing the best possible solution. So that's one part of it, which I believe is something, which can be introduced and implemented even at a primary level, because that's the child's, growth level. Here we are not talking about, doing a hardcore coding in HTML or Java or one of these programming languages. We are definitely not talking about those things at primary level. But the moment we come to a middle school kind of an environment where a child at class 6 to 8 level comes in, and with the kind of technology exposure that the kids have today, and thanks to people like White Hat Junior, of course, it's presented in a very different way. But with that product as well, what you learn is the next step of coding, is the way I'll put it, to become a good user of a good well-coded product, right? So whether it is any video game that a child is playing today, or it's a WhatsApp, or is it a Facebook, or is it one of the Zoom platforms that we are currently live on, each one of these things has a foundation at the back, which is created using certain coding and technology and language around it. So I think at middle school level, the exposure to the extent that, yes, these are the utilizations or the implementation of coding and the technology, which is enabling so many things. The child getting to appreciate these things at that level would be good enough. And then when they go to a class 9, 10, 11, 12 level is the time when we actually introduce officially, according to CBSE curriculum as well, as to what is code, what is a language, what is HTML, what is a page, how do you create all those things. So I believe schools also will have to go into that phase and keep it at the back of their mind that, okay, this is the cycle that one is supposed to go through, and then probably bring about that kind of approach to overall learning of coding. Fatima, on this.
Sudhir, I think this is strategic. When you look at the middle school, if you look at statistics, these are the number of gamers on there. This age group is actually using technology for gamification, for various other reasons, and they're mature users. This is the group that has already experienced it at elementary, foundational, preparatory, etc. So this is where a lot of them can then apply a lot of their knowledge as well, because they're users of it, they understand it. they will tell you how quickly the upgrade is taking place. So how is that happening? Why was that happening? I believe exposure to this is important. Sudeep, quite frankly, IBM has a Watson app. It's predicting diagnostic of a virus vis-a-vis a bacterial infection at 95% accuracy. So anything that's going to be automated, is repetitive, is going to be automated in the future.
Absolutely.
This generation is going to have to know about it. I would rather give them scientific knowledge so that at least they're not going in, the other way, which is all about becoming entrepreneurs at age 8, but actually giving them an opportunity to solve problems, to be able to create. And I think that's the big thing. It's computational thinking. I feel NEP did injustice to the word computational thinking by putting it down as coding. That's where the confusion is.
Absolutely.
I have just one point to add here. Like we as panelists, we can think over it. Like implementation level, whether we should do it as a hobby class or an after-school activity, or whether to be included as a basic skill to be integrated in the curriculum itself. That means the coding in all the subjects. That is how we have to think, how we have to integrate. And I think when the coding will be implemented, NEP will be implemented, then probably the computer periods will go from the class and the coding will start, because we don't have to teach what a computer is to the students then.
Thank God, Beena ma'am, we should take that out of the syllabus anyway. Like I said, there can't be computer labs anymore.
Yeah.
I think Ms. Chauhan can add some views.
Yeah, in the sense that, as you rightly said, even every time a child is accessing any kind of game and WhatsApp, he's already coding. And not only that, actually, it's all about different kinds of sets of instructions. Of course, a lot of it is technical also. So it's integrated in everything. In fact, nowadays, this NEP thing happened before we went online. But now with online, how much they've learned, and they're already integrating so much of coding. So it's sort of come a little, a little before, but children are integrating it. So we should do away with a specific separate period, if you know what I mean, and integrate it in all the subjects, because they're using it and
Yes.
they need to be equipped with that.
That will be our recommendation, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that would be our recommendation.
Whether we accept it or not, I think Fatima very nicely put it up that kids are already there. They know what are the next upgrades. They know what is going to be next thing. In fact, they'll probably be giving feedbacks to the best of the gaming companies which are designing, okay, this is what is needed and that's what is needed. This is working well and this is not working well. So I think that's really a welcome step. And a word that I'm picking from Fatima's discourse is the word strategic. So schools will have to start thinking strategic. How do you actually implement that in a way that it starts integrating with what the child is going through in academia as well as his personal life. So if that is something which is going to be a part of the whole learning process, I believe we'll be able to do justice to the word coding or any the form you'd like to put in. I guess with this, I'd like to move on to the last topic which we have for the day, and I'll want to bring in Fatima into this, being an expert on that particular topic. How do you approach sports and the holistic development, or maybe the other performing arts, as an integral part of learning, especially at the middle school level, where it actually sets the foundation for a child to probably nurture his talent or skills and turn it into a career, or maybe the rest of his life as he would probably want to approach it.
So Sudhir, you've actually been very kind to say, middle school is the right period to develop and nurture. With our parenting body today, at senior KG level, they are the next Tendulkar and Virat Kohlis. So the challenge really, and Rajiv should have been here, I think it has to do a lot with a lot of things. It sounds very glamorous in the national education policy to say, listen, let's bring sport in. Every child should play. Schools do not have parks. Schools do not have access to infrastructure. I'm going to apologize upfront, Beena ma'am and Mr. Han. Some principals don't think that's important. This is going to take away from my English period, my science teacher scribbling, my Hindi teacher to never gets more than 3 periods. I have a special needs bat. How will I manage? You know what? Forget sport, forget PE. So I think, again, going down to Sudhir, this is going to be the hardest bit to implement, because what's going to quickly happen is, you know what, 7 hours of academia, and then, you know, we'll extend it to 7.5 hours, and after school, let them play, or let them come half an hour before and let them play. The integration will happen in that way. The actual integration should happen in the way the international schools do it, which is part of the curriculum. However, again, very glamorous on paper, you cannot have just 70 minutes of sport in the week. If you really want to integrate sport, it's going to have to be perhaps Friday afternoon taken off and children introduced to multiple sports. And in this country, we are very performance driven. What is the outcome of this? Will my child get into cricket, soccer, basketball? Will he make it to the team? Wo school ko represent karega? These sort of questions are going to be difficult, Sudhir, because first of all, sport begins from elementary years. Middle school is only just the beginning, but parents think it's already the area of specialization. By now, my child should know, no, between ballet and basketball, which one should she choose? She should not be choosing. That child should not be choosing. Exposure should continue in the middle school. It has to be multi-sport. It has to be indoor and outdoor sport. You cannot think of sport confined to infrastructure. Then make that provision if you don't have the infrastructure to take your children to the park, the nearby park. You know, it's going to have to be a lot of effort on part of the management, a lot of skilling of the leadership team to understand what it means. My big worry is the PE department. If we're talking about skilling teachers, we'll have to talk about skilling that PE department, because that skill set is the skill set that should have taught us. These children need a different skill set. Sport is not just about talent. It's about fitness, it's about rehab, it's about nutrition, it's about mental conditioning. There are so many aspects of it. My worry is by putting it down, everyone will park it as a period and for the sake of it, do it without a scheme of work. So for me, I see a lot more, I see great opportunities. I mean, we run academies, we run in-school curriculum, after school hours, but progressive schools can take it on. Schools that are thinking of this simply as one more thing, like coding, are bapre, now we have to do this also. You know, this means my English periods get reduced. It's going to become like that. So mindset, I think this calls for a serious leadership, conclave, Sudhir, maybe for the next webinar, get all the principals involved. The mindset shift to say the careers for tomorrow are going to be sport, creativity, basically all the co-curriculars. Your traditional subjects of sciences, etc., may be replaced by technology. And yeah, the coders may be actually replacing them. So the mindset shift to sport as a fitness, as recreation, not creation of talent that's going on to represent India. I think that will need parental support. It'll need a government to also make it mandatory for schools to participate in more competitions, not just those schools who are doing it because, they recognize its importance. It has to be mandatory to field teams. For me, again, it's going to be controversial. You're going to say, you're leaving it to the state, but it has to be a directive. Beena ma'am, you said, should it be after school hours? After school hours, you'll do it, it'll become optional. It'll have to be mandatory. What bothers me is India's 36th in the list of nations that produces sportsmen. We have 1.3 billion people. You mean to say we do not have talent? No, we just haven't nurtured it. And schools are going to play a big part in nurturing tomorrow's talent. We cannot only think about cricket. It's going to be kabaddi. It's going to be multi-sport. And again, a sportsman's wife telling you children should be playing everything up to grade 8, and that's when you decide the specialization. Not up to grade 5 and then 6, 7, 8 they decide the specialization. Big mindset change, Sudhir.
I think it's once again strategic in nature.
Yeah.
I believe NEP is the more and more I'm discussing with people around, experts around, it once again calls for a complete strategy change, the way we've been approaching schools, whether it is coding, whether it is experiential learning, whether it is sports, whether it is the language aspect of it. I think all of these things call upon the leaders of the school to bring about a change in the way they think about running and managing the school. And at the same time, it's not just the leaders, it's probably the other stakeholders as well. A lot of our viewers have commented, and like Rajiv was putting it, it's the parent. It's the parent's expectation, it's the parent's conditioning, it's the parent's mindset, which has to be molded and gradually made into, like Fatima said, it's also about fitness. So I know it for a fact that in India, we don't attach a lot of value to fitness being, one of the objectives in the growing years, right? And that is what.
Sudeep, that's only for Instagram. That's only for Instagram. Those videos and TikTok videos.
That's so true. So this is exactly, I think, what is going to change the way we approach the entire thing. I think I'll come back to Ms. Chauhan once again. Ma'am, in terms of sports, like Fatima said, it's not just about a couple of periods here and there. It's about how do you bring about that systematic change. It's about how do you integrate that and make it a mainstream. I'm avoiding the word subject, but maybe falling short of it. It's something which really needs a focused approach of those 15 years of a child's growth and learning period.
Sudhir, if I could talk about just one thing,
Sure.
like since I've got about 34 schools, the problem I'm facing is that, 6 hours, 20 minutes of school time, how do we give this? Everything is important. Art is important, sports is important, and the parents wants everything. But how do we put it? I sometimes...
Beena ma'am, it's very simple. You timetable it. You have to have 3 months focus.
So right now, CBSE talks about every day there should be a sports period, right? And 6 hours, 20 minutes, every day sports period. How do we complete the syllabus? I'm giving sports period, but as you rightly said, ultimately the teachers will say, sports go away, arts go away, but we don't.
So when we speak about interdisciplinary learning, Beena ma'am, get your math teacher to combine with the PE teacher, and you teach angles on the cricket field.
We are doing that, but I'm telling you, even the Indian condition right now, what I'm facing is when there is extreme weather condition, schools cut down the time. Only 2 hours the school will function. When there is monsoon, school 2 hours. When there is, extreme heat, school cut down. So then how do the children play? And I'm finding it implementation, though we all want to do it, everything we want to give. So I sometimes feel that, initial Gurukul system should be made compulsory where the children are staying and learning so that we have the entire 24 hours, depending upon the weather, they can do whatever they want to do. I feel that sometimes.
I was about to say that probably residential schools are the answer to this entire timing issue.
No, but Sudhir, in one of our consultancy school, taking parental consent, we've just extended the school hour. We actually call it time to play. So it's an hour of all co-curriculars, an extension of what they do in the lunchtime, snack time, and their periods as well. Because sport is very important to the trustee of that school. Beena ma'am, it's not going to be possible to include everything.
Probably.
So I think,
but we'll work towards it.
Ma'am, I think I'll add something on this. Now that Fatima mentioned, I could recall one of our schools in MP. This is what we have done. We have actually, so there is something called as Sahodaya in CBSE, which I'm sure everybody's aware of. And there's some competition which takes place. Fatima talked about new teams to be created and being representing and stuff like that. So what we did is we actually created 9 different sports teams in our school. So one for cricket, one for football, one for kabaddi, one for this, one for that one. And we literally extended the school hours. So we said, okay, and Beena ma'am, this is where I'm coming to. So we said, okay, I can't do it for 1,000 children, right? I know that's a practical problem. But what I said is, okay, fine, I'm going to do 9 teams, each team having about 15, 20, 30 students, which means that between 9 teams, I could cover at least 250 to 300 students. I said, okay, let's take these 300 students. We went to the parents. We said, okay, we want to build our 9 teams. And in fact, it was 9 teams. I think there were more of these where we said that, okay, we'll create our sports, music band also. We'll create our art club also. And we did it. So we extended the school hours by 1.5 hours. So we said this 1.5 hour every day is something which we are going to dedicate to performing arts. We're going to dedicate it to schools. We'll have coaches for everything. We obviously could not afford to have 20 coaches in the school on our payrolls. So we said, okay, we'll call all different coaches to, mentor these teams specifically for that 1.5 to 2 hours. So they are like visiting faculty to us and doing the training of these children in their sports area and stuff like that for that 1.5 hour. I'll also highlight something here. This was a big logistical challenge because our school there is located almost 7 kilometers out of the city, and buses leave at 2:30, 3 o'clock. After that, 6 hour, 20 minutes is over. And we said, okay, how do we send these 270 students back home? We can't, think of running buses in 2 shifts. That's financially impossible. So what we did is we actually spoke to the parents. We got the consent of these 250, 300 parents that, okay, we'll arrange for 4 additional buses. So that called on us to bear that additional cost or whatever, and said, okay, fine, we'll send these children at 4:30 or 5:30 and drop them at 3 different locations in the city from where the parents will make the arrangement to pick up. So I think
hotspots, yeah.
it could be made possible because it was a collaborative effort. There are still 1,000+ students in that same school who do not want to subscribe to this, or the parents cannot take care of the logistics, or we can't extend it. Whatever the challenges are, the bottom line is we could manage to create those 300 students who are going, and that's now becoming a motivation for others to come in to do that. So I think we'll have to start somewhere.
What we did is we have integrated the sports into our timetable, and children love it. But yes, we have neglected grade 9 and 10. So they don't get that much sports. Because
not only you, I think everybody.
Everyone, yes.
Because 9th and 10th and 12th.
Yes, 9th, 10th, AS and A levels, of course, we don't even give them. We allow them to play after their lectures are over. And then you can just go on to the basketball court or whatever and play. We don't stop them. But then, we've not really integrated it. But a lot has to do with parents also. Because if you ask them to wait back, then the same thing, logistics, buses, this, that. No, my child has to go for this class, that class. So somewhere parents need to also, sort of get
counseled. So Shanita, Mr. Han, what's actually going to really transform and kickstart this is the parent thinking about this as a career. And I'm going to say leagues like IPL, Kabaddi, soccer, etc., creating career opportunities is giving the parents that mindset that, all right, this is an alternative career. It's still being called alternative, not a career choice, because your bankers and your lawyers and your doctors and your educators are actually the careers. But I think that's going to happen purely because industry is now creating opportunities for younger children. So the 9 to 12 is actually the best talent, and they are not playing enough. So I think that's also something that needs to be understood. I do understand academic pressure, but if you look at the top sportsmen in the world, there are cases of them doing well academically as well and getting dedication, but then the school also should support. Allow them to.
If I talk about NEP, when they have this time, there is some welcome change of bringing down. Maybe assessment pattern might change. Board exam, like there is a basic mathematics and advanced mathematics. All these things are talked about. So probably that pressure of academics will lower down and the children will focus more towards games and sports. I'm hoping so.
I was about to say maybe we'll need another NEP to get rid of this class 10 and 12 board exams, so to say, which is basically, depriving the kids of so many things in their life at that critical stage.
But Sudhir, if you think about it, the life skills that the NEP also talks about, briefly touches upon, if I'm going to say, in a confused sort of way, is actually sports. Discipline, time management, commitment, all of that. Now, even parents want that, but they want that academically. They don't want it in sport. They want demonstration
I think
of this.
Fatima, being fair and being a little rational to the entire scenario, it's got a lot of things which we do in the policy or in schools or, with our syllabus as principals. I understand all those things because I run schools myself, so I can relate to those challenges. It's got to do with also, a lot of pressure that a parent is under or the school is under, right? Because we will have to acknowledge this fact that 10 years ago when IPL came into the picture, right? Before that, I don't think sports was something which you could have actually assured a vast majority of children a secured career. Thanks to IPL, I think today we've got IPL, we've got Kabaddi leagues, we've got football clubs coming in and this, that, and so there are multiple avenues coming up now.
That's
so
what I'm
parents
saying.
Are becoming more acceptable.
Corporate world will have to create those opportunities.
Absolutely. Yeah, so this is what I think is, we are in a transitory phase kind of a stuff. As a parent, if I send my child to a school and I'm wanting him to have a great education, our country, given the sheer size of it, the population, and the corresponding, career opportunities, we today have a capability as a nation to probably absorb 5 lakh engineers and give them employment. Maybe paying them 10 lakhs or 2 lakhs, that's a different matter altogether. But yes, they have employment. But if I were to produce 10 lakh sportsmen every year, I may not be able to give them that kind of a career. And that is probably what is the biggest worry in the mind of a parent when he says that, okay, I don't want to go into the mainstream. And like you very rightly said, it's not just about career. We'll have to start approaching it more like a life skill. It's
way of life.
It's a way of life.
A way
Yes.
of life.
I mean, I remember my school, except for 1 or 2 sports periods or 1 or 2 sports that I participated in. Cricket, of course, was a crazy thing for all of us during those days, and we never thought of any other sport beyond cricket. But yeah, it was never perceived like a mainstream thing. And I believe as we progress further and there are more opportunities created, it will start becoming more and more accepted. And today, I mean, in those days, there were like 11 cricketers, and I'm sure you can relate it to this much more than anybody else on the panel. So you had space for 11 cricketers, right? But today, even if I don't make it to the national team and I can play 5 IPLs, I'm done. That's okay. That's a good enough career.
But Sudhir, it's not only about playing.
Agree.
Look at the
So
ancillary
I said,
services.
yeah, I said there are a lot of other opportunities now.
Physiotherapy, you can be a coach, you can be a mentor. And I'm telling you today, people who are coaching have never played
Yes,
internationally or nationally at any competitive level.
True.
But their ability. So I think back end also there's a lot. The sports management is a career. Having said that, 18 million students are pushed out into industry every year. I'm not sure there are jobs for everyone. So I think people will have to think alternatively.
Absolutely. So I think it's just got to do with that proportion, which is basically, becoming a little detrimental to this acceptability. Sorry, ma'am, you were adding
And I think we need, as a nation, to get a little more conscious about getting fit. So we
Yes.
need to be fitter.
Yeah. I mean, that's what
And
that is very
incorporate
critical. I think at school level, specifically the middle school and primary level, I would want to integrate sports from that fitness point of view more than the career point of view.
Yeah.
I
Right?
think
I mean,
middle school level is very, very important because that adolescent change is happening at that level.
exactly.
The children are, the girls are, and boys are growing at that level, and they are, eating more. Their stress levels are more. The bodily changes, hormonal changes. So, sports and art should be a part of,
Yes, all integrate.
part of their life, so that all these problems, actually the adolescent problem that they are facing, can be lowered or minimized. So I think we will have to bring that mindset in the students, and it becomes part of life. When we were children, when I was a child in the school, we used to have a longer hour in the school, and we used to play in the school, and now the time is reduced, and after school tuitions and all these things are actually, children are confused. One thing I would like to tell you, one small anecdote. We were giving this academic board classes guidance, doubt clearance session to the children. So I just showed a small clip of Tom and Jerry, which I thought would lighten the thing. And I asked whether Jerry was trying to do some innovative things. I wanted children to say that, okay, what skill should be there, innovation and all. And they are saying, we have to strategize. And they were all tense. They were not thinking at that thing, So the children we have to anyway change. The policy should talk about board, something different about
happiness. No one wants a happy child. People want a perfect child, and that's the big problem.
Yes, so it is really
true. Thank you so much, everyone. That was really great. The risk of extending the session by 10 minutes, I've got great inputs, and I'm sure this was equally fruitful for all the attendees and the panelists as well. I got one question which is raised by one of the attendees. He says, I would like to know when this NEP policy will actually be implemented in schools. My daughter is currently in 7th grade in ICSE school in Mumbai. So as much as I understand, and maybe if any other of the panelists is, so right now what we've got is a broad framework of the policy, what is going to be the guiding document as such. And I believe the individual state, the affiliation boards, whether it is CBSE or ICSE or international boards, are going to come up with their own SOPs and the modalities of implementing the policy, and that's something which is due apparently in 2021. Is what the government has said, that new affiliation bylaws, etc., should be coming in, and this policy is going to be a guiding note for the next couple of decades. It's not something which is going to change things tomorrow morning, right? And that is probably the reason so much of discussion and so much of thing. With this, I think I'd like to thank all our panelists for being here and sparing your time and sharing your inputs. To all the audiences, thank you so much. To look forward to having you all joining us for the next session, where we're going to talk about what are the changes coming up at class 9 to 12 level, the so-called academia, the so-called career-oriented changes, and how we're going to bring it. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Do have a great evening. Thanks once again for joining us.
Thank you so much, Beena,
Thank
Shanila,
you.
Sudhir,
Thank you,
Rajiv, if
Fatima.
you're there.
Yeah, he's already, I think Rajiv was out of battery, so he's texted me that he'll have to log off because he's out of battery there.
Sudhir, I have to say I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Saturday evening, this is great because there's no IPL today.
Wow.
So this is my boost.
Thank you so much. I'm sure we all are just waiting for the next 2 matches of IPL and looking forward to having a great end of the season.
Super.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Do have a great
Bye-bye.
evening.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, audience. Thank you.